Welcome to Bloom with Chelsea Rose. I have my friend Natalie Ribbons here, and I'm so excited to talk with you today. How are you doing today?
Hello. I'm very good, and I'm very honored to be on your show, Chelsea.
Oh, thank you. So, for our listeners, in a nutshell, can you describe who you are and what kind of work you create?
Hmm. Well, gosh, in a nutshell, I am a musician that has been in a couple different projects. My first one was Agent Ribbons, and then I started a band called Tele Novella, and that's my main thing. And while the path has evolved a lot, I am writing simple, sort of heartfelt pop music and just trying to keep the equation as few but quality ingredients as possible. And I sort of started out with that formula, drifted away, and I'm kind of coming back and realized that that's my strong suit. So
Wow, that's
I
so
think that.
cool. Yeah, I wanted to ask you, that's funny. I wanted to ask you about you have a new album that's about to come out.
Yes, it's coming up February 5th, but we've kind of
Awesome.
had this really long lead up time up until that date.
Awesome.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. I'm super excited for the new album. And I did kind of want to backtrack and ask you about like, how did it all start? Like, how long has Telenovela been a band?
um, I should have these responses a little more prep for me. I think that we started in 2012. It was on the heels of Agent Ribbons breaking up. Agent Ribbons, we were having a rough time. I think that life was pulling us in different directions for a lot of reasons. And then we got in this car accident
Oh,
in
wow.
Memphis right after going to Elvis Presley's house. Actually, it was on Halloween. And it was so weird because I had had a tarot reading the night before, or that's right, it was the day after Halloween. So on the eve of Halloween, I had this tarot reading about how I was about to embark on this huge like transition. And then we got in this car accident and I had to take the train home. Um, and Lauren and I were not in the best place. We're definitely okay now and good friends. And she lives here in Lockhart and also has a shop. But, South by Southwest was coming up and our label was like, oh, no, this won't do. Like, you need to come up with something, Natalie. We can't not have you perform. You're kind of like the anchor for this particular show we booked. So I was just kind of thinking about what I should do. Should I play Agent Ribbon songs by myself? Should I get other people to play with me? And what I ended up deciding to do was kind of starting this project with Jason, my partner, and some members of his band that he was in at the time called Bel Air. And we sort of cobbled together telenovela on the fly and played about 60% new original material and then 40% Agent Ribbon songs, just to sort of do something. And then from there, we really liked working together and it wasn't terrible. Like I've always heard about with, I always just dreaded this idea of being in a band with your romantic partner. It seemed like a bad idea, but it worked really well. So that's how it started. And it's gone through a lot of phases since then. But the band now is pretty much Jason and I with in the foreseeable future will be like a rotating cast of characters of whoever's available to
Love
tour at
it.
the time.
Yeah, that always allows more flexibility, I think, just
Is that what
allowing
you
the
do?
band. Yeah, that's what I'm doing
Yeah.
now.
Okay, cool. That's
Yeah.
what I thought.
Yeah, I have a
I've
pretty
yeah.
stable lineup that I'm really stoked on, but
Okay.
but it's
But
nice
there's
to have the opportunity if needed to like change it out. There's not certain band members you're depending on aside from your partner. That's so cool. So I want to backtrack a little bit too, because I've never really asked you like, where did you grow up and when did you start playing music?
I grew up in Sacramento, California. I started my parents put me in classical piano lessons when I turned 5 because they wanted me to be like a performing classical pianist when I became an adult. And my grandfather is a classical guitar player. Um, but, you know, my mom had always really wanted to be a musician because it's sort of the only way to really get close to my grandfather. He's this kind of fascinating man who's very aloof and playful. And I always describe him as somebody that can explain the Big Bang Theory to a child, but doesn't remember to tie his shoes before he leaves the house. Like, very head in the clouds, like not practical man. And she always wanted to be close with him and kind of couldn't because she wasn't really that interested in music. So she wanted me to be this sort of, I think she, you know, parents do that to their kids a lot. They want you to do what they didn't get to do. And I was really in a very, very strict household. When I came home from school, I had to be either sitting at the piano or sitting at the dinner table doing homework until dinner time every day. I was on a very short leash. I really seldomly allowed to hang out with other friends. So, but the funny thing is, I just never really liked it and never connected in the way that I do now. But what happened was in high school, I got more or less kicked out of my high school, which is too long of a story to tell right now. But and I was kind of told, I was given an ultimatum. It was like I had to be sent to one of these private Catholic schools, which my parents are atheists, but they just thought I needed the structure to make me behave myself a little bit more. Or I could audition on piano for this new experimental performing arts high school that was like way out in the sticks. And I definitely chose that immediately. And so I went and auditioned, and the man that was auditioning me could easily perceive, for somehow, I don't know why, or maybe he couldn't perceive it, but he said, "Do you have any original material to play?" And I hadn't prepared any because it was a classical audition. But I was like, "Oh, well, yeah, actually I do." And he said, "Do you sing?" And I said, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, why don't you play me something like that?" And so I played some of my original material and he didn't say anything and I left. And then I got in the mail that I was accepted to the school. So I started going there for my sophomore year of high school, and the school was so undisciplined and unstructured. It was like essentially run by hippies in a field. And immediately when I started going to that school, they quickly realized that I was not interested in classical music. They didn't particularly care what I was working on as long as I was working. And I started immediately learning / teaching myself how to play guitar on the sly, unbeknownst to my parents. And so they weren't aware for years that my emphasis essentially became singing and writing songs at that school.
Yeah, that's so cool. And from a pretty young age, it seems like you were writing songs.
Yeah, the first song I wrote was about a turkey. I think I was in first grade. So
Wow. And then when did you start your first band? Like, how did that come about?
Agent Ribbons was my first band. I really wanted to be in a band in high school, but it was the school was much more women or female identifying students than male. But in the music program, there weren't many female identifying students at all, which is kind of weird. Most of the women were in dance programs and theater and gosh, I'm even forgetting all the things that we had there. We had some film stuff. Anyway, so the boys just really were not interested in playing with me, quite frankly. And I wasn't really that cool either. So when I graduated high school, being in a band sounded awesome. I actually quit music for a few years, um, which is kind of another long story, but I just like had this epiphany that I totally sucked after going to college. And because I was a music major, didn't want to do music anymore, switched to art history. And then maybe my second or third year into City College, I had to take a psychology class. And I didn't want to take a normal one. So there's this weird class that you could choose called The Psychology of Creativity and Intuition. And I
Wow.
thought, okay, this is more my vibe. So signed up for that. The teacher was this lady. She was like kind of like the art teacher from Ghost World in a way. Her name was Nandi, and she wore a lot of like loose fitting clothing. Um, and the textbook for the class was that book, The Artist's Way. Are you familiar with that book?
Mm-hmm. Wow.
That was the textbook. And I was kind of like smirking my way through the class a little bit. We did a lot of exercises where we'd all lay in a circle on the floor of the classroom and put our heads on each other's stomachs like total strangers. And then we had to force ourselves to laugh out loud until it became real laughter instead of fake laughter, because the vibration of each other's bellies would like make you laugh.
Right. I think I've heard of that before.
Yeah,
Wow,
it's
that's so
probably
interesting. Do you feel like that was it kind of like a joke for you, or do you feel like you actually like took some things away from that have like maybe influenced your creative work at
definitely.
all?
Both are true. It was a total joke to me. I was, you know, I had definitely a glint in my eye throughout the whole course. And I really was both laughing at and laughing with Nandi. But in the end, the morning pages that are required in the artist's way and a lot of the little exercises that you have to do, the long and short of it is I wrote like the whole first Agent Ribbons record. And I didn't own a guitar anymore because I'd sold them all. So I had to borrow a guitar from this guy named David Houston, who actually was a recording engineer and producer in like the 70s and 80s in Sacramento, and actually recorded this record that I really love by a band called the Twinkies, among many other records. And he was sort of this like weird figure in the local Sacramento scene. He always dressed in complete black. He was much older than me, maybe like 62 at the time. And he lent me this like 1967 Dan Electro convertible. And it kind of had this cool, it was like acoustic-y electric guitar, sort of like those silver tones.
Mm-hmm.
And it just had this weird sound. I wasn't used to playing a guitar like that. And I wrote with that in the artist's way, I just wrote this whole record. And I really wanted to be in a band. I didn't want to play this stuff solo. And I was like, I need to try this whole band thing. And I definitely got all of my courage to do this from that class. And I was still enrolled in the class at the time. And I was working at a record store on K Street in Sacramento, just called Records. It was kind of a legendary spot, but it was a real shithole. I mean, one of my jobs every day was to go and fish the dead bats out of the shelves that had died each night,
Oh no.
and to empty the buckets under the holes in the roof that would fill out with this like piss color water. It was a really rough and so there was this guy that I was working with named Jamie, and he had a girlfriend that would always come in that seemed really cool. And she came in one day and said that she just bought a drum set but had never drummed before. And I was like, oh my God, let's start a band. And she said, okay, yeah, let's do it. So we kept not booking a time to practice. And she'd literally never played before. But then I got invited to open for Chelsea Wolfe in San Francisco at this little place called House of Shields. And Chelsea Wolfe was a good friend of mine at the time. Not super close, but we were just kind of both bopping around in the scene there. Obviously, this is way before she got super successful. And so she was just doing a solo show, and she was like, yeah, you should open for me. So we played one time, a single practice, Lauren playing drums to whatever the hell I was doing. And then we were like, all right, we're ready to go. Let's go play in San Francisco. And the show was really well received. And from there, we just kept playing together. But it was very ramshackle. And we were extremely unaware of how ramshackle we were. Like, that was something I truly wasn't quite privy to until many years later. And so there was this almost maybe unintentional Shags-esque aspect to that band, because it was just pretty cobbled together in a non-traditional way, I guess you could say.
I love that. There's something beautiful about that, like, beginner's mind, you know?
Definitely.
And I feel like, so before we get into your new album, because it seems to me like you're sort of like going back to those roots of, like you said, kind of stripping away some of the elements and just getting back to the roots. Before we get into that, like, you've just been playing in your bands for so long. Like, did you ever think that that would be your career? Like, did you ever think that's what you would be doing? And what was that journey like for you?
I did think it would be my career when I was a teenager. I definitely did not when I was younger, as a kid. I didn't really have a clear vision of what my life was going to be like. I thought actually, that's not true. I thought I was going to be a fashion designer, and I was constantly drawing outfits. But I was a terrible seamstress. And then, that time that I quit music for a few years, I was not thinking that that would be my career again. I thought maybe I could get a job at a gallery or something someday, but I was messing around with a lot of hard drugs and dropped out of college several times and started to really lose faith in myself to even really do anything. Started really only seeing myself as being like a waitress or a service industry. Not to say that there's anything wrong with that. I've been in the service industry most of my life. And, I hate using the word just before that as a qualifier, but I definitely didn't think I was going to be able to finish any type of artistic project for a period there until I kind of quit drugs cold turkey and moved into a completely different house and got away from some people that I was hanging out with that made it really difficult to stop. And then it really wasn't too long after that, the Agent Ribbons came about. And that was I have to really laugh at myself sometimes. I don't know if you've experienced this, Chelsea, and it's like, I feel like it's too embarrassing to talk about with people, but I was so disillusioned in the first year of the band. I was 21. And we were not having any big successes. We were like playing little bars and kind of crappy places. We'd gone on a few tours, but I didn't know that many people that had toured at that point. But we really started planning our lives around this like future rock star reality that we had envisioned for ourselves at that point. We can remember conversations that we had with like tears of laughter in our eyes about how maybe 4 months into starting the band, we were starting to plan on how we were gonna, maybe in a year or two when we were making more money, we were gonna like split the cost of an apartment in San Francisco, but keep our apartment in Sacramento and like live this dual life with this mysterious money that there was like no accounting for at all. And it was just like, so quickly we just thought, oh, okay, this is our new life now. And it's clearly going to all work out. And my belief in that was so clear and so strong. And in a way, it kept me going through a lot of like hellish tours and reality that was just so dreamy to me at the time, because we were on the way to something big. And that was my mentality until I was maybe around 23. And then it was the total opposite. Then I'd been hammered down by life. And like, then no part of me even really thought that this was ever going to be a viable career at all, and that it was clearly a passion project. So the pendulum really swung aggressively the other way in a like year period.
Yeah, I definitely relate to that in starting Summer Twins and having that like I said though, there's something so beautiful about that beginner's mind when I feel like if we would have known what the reality would have been, we probably wouldn't have like jumped into it with that much energy, you know? And like you said, that's what kept you
Oh my God.
going for so long.
Yes.
And so, yeah, so you guys toured, you guys have had like so many albums with Tele Novella. And I remember seeing you post, I've been following you on Instagram since like the release of your last album. And it seems like you sort of had a point where you were like maybe ready to like lay it to rest, or you were just kind of like struggling with that reality of it.
Mm-hmm.
What was that point like for you with
Mm-hmm.
Tele
Oh yeah.
Novella, and how did you like kind of bounce back from that?
Yeah, definitely. We we had an albums, we had put out an EP that we had recorded, Dub Narcotic, and kind of were writing on the coattails of that for some time as we sort of scrambled to write enough material for a full-length record. And by the time that we did have all those songs, half those songs we'd already been playing for a year, because I'm not super prolific. And we had it in our minds that we definitely wanted to record with a guy named Danny Reich, who's now a very good friend of mine. And he's really talented, but he was so busy that we had already put off recording our first full-length record at that point so many times. And then on top of that, we kept postponing it months and months and months to work around Danny's availability, because he was drumming in several bands and just touring all the time. And honestly, what we should have done in retrospect, and this is nothing against Danny, but what we should have honestly done is considered recording with someone else, because we were over those songs, beyond over them, by the time we actually got into the studio to record them. And we were not using our time efficiently. We weren't clear-minded about seeing the songs in a fresh way and doing what benefits the song best. We were just so used to doing what we did live. And I now do not believe that ever serves the song the best way possible. I'm now honestly a believer of recording songs before you drill them into your mind in the set way, performing them night after night.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that's different for everyone. And so then the process of recording was interrupted several times and dragged out over months. It was extremely expensive. We spent much more money than we had ever intended to spend. And then at that point, we still hadn't worked out what record label we were going to put it on. And that was another whole ordeal that was extremely humbling, to say the least. And by the time this record was released, we all had no artistic connection whatsoever to the material. And I also don't feel that our mentality served the way that the recordings were processed and made in the studio. So to be honest, I was never really that happy with that first record that we did, because it didn't sound how I had originally imagined it would. Then the record comes out, and we didn't manage all the elements well. We went on some tours that were very thankless. Some of the most difficult tours I've ever been on in my life. And that's saying a lot, because I really have toured so much. And I just came home from, I don't know, maybe the second or third tour, and I was just so done. Like, stick a fork in me, I'm cooked.
Mm-hmm.
And no part of me felt any sentimentality for the project at all. And we never actually just broke the band up. I came home after the second tour and started a vintage shop. And then after the third tour, went back to that and just kind of didn't look back for several years. And I was just ready to do other stuff. I started the shop. We were working on renovating the house, and I just, I didn't care. And it was the second time in my life where I think I was very close to quitting music forever. But after a few years went by, so then Matt left the band. I think he could kind of see the writing on the wall, and he was ready to start a farm. He was the drummer. And there was no intention whatsoever in coming back to this, if I'm going to be totally honest with myself and you, but I don't know if I ever really said that. And then we got a completely random grant out of nowhere for some reason that I don't really understand, from Pabst Blue Ribbon beer. Came out of nowhere, and they were like,
wow,
we want to pay for you to make a record, and we want to give the money directly to a producer engineer, so pick who you want to work with and get to it. And I did not have the material written at all, but we weren't going to say no, and we couldn't spend the money because it wasn't like a cash grant, it was like time in the studio grant. And we just honestly we committed to recording one song a month with Danny, only on a Tascam 8-track cassette recorder, so that we had all these limitations, so that I finally felt connected to the process. And it wasn't like, do the vocal and we'll figure out what sounds we want to use later. It's like, you have to decide, it sounds good right now, this is how you want it to sound going in, and I could ascertain what we were doing. So anyway, that's how it happened. We made a record I'm so happy with. I felt connected to every step of the process, and it was so simple. There were not a lot of moving parts. It was just myself, Jason, and on about half the record, Sarah. And then, of course, Danny recording it. And not a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And I will seriously never go back to doing it any other way. I'm pretty sure I want to stick to this forever. It's way forward for me.
Yeah, I love what you said about the limitations. How do you think having those limitations informed how this record came about?
It's everything. It has everything to do with it. And when I look back at anything that I've done that I still feel really connected to emotionally, there was something like that involved. When you're recording to tape, like I said, you have to kind of decide how you want it to sound as you're going in. So you have to sort of mess around with stuff and go through, well, do you want it to have slapback delay, or do you want to do reverb, or do you want to do both, or do you want to have it dry? You think about that with every single element, and you have to sort of conceptualize how you want to structure this song beforehand, because you only have 8 tracks. And you can bounce tracks, but that's like a whole nother thing, and we haven't done much of that at all. There's also really not a lot of editing that you want to mess with, because it's very fallible to punch in with a cassette. So the vast majority of everything we do is all one take. It's not multi-takes pieced together. So you have to really feel connected to the performance that you're giving, and not have your head wrapped up in, does my voice sound optimal right now? Is this the best way I said the word the? Like, you're not thinking about that shit. You really want an authentic, honest performance, because you're probably going to stick with the whole thing. And that was something I'd lost sight of with digital recording. It really became less about what's the fanciest, most expensive mic in the studio, and more about, gosh, which one's just resonating with me right now? And I've found that dynamic mics work best for my voice. I really like RE15s, and it's not the most expensive mic money can buy. It's like a $300 mic. And, Danny has mics in there that are like $6,000. But it just wasn't working for me in the moment with the way it felt giving that performance. So I love having to make those decisions now, instead of saying all the options are there for you later, because it's too much. I think for a creator of any kind, you need to be able to know what you want to some degree right now, in order to be connected with the feeling that makes art making so rewarding. And if you lose that magic of like, wow, this feels so good while I'm doing it, I don't think you're going to make the best thing that you can make, because you're going to think you can fix it later. You're going to think that you're saving the inspiration for later down the road. And that's only that's only true to a very small degree in comparison to what I'm experienced with finding my love of the process again, you know?
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. I'm so glad that you found your love for the process again. And yeah,
Thank you.
I think you're so right. Like the magic is in the process when you're in that zone
Mhm.
and you are playing with different sounds and saying, "Oh, what if we try this? What if we try that?" Like I think that truly is where the magic happens. And I agree that when you have those options where you're like, "Oh yeah, we can fix it later on." It's so easy to go down a rabbit hole and kind of get lost, get like
Oh my God,
far
yes.
from your original idea, which I think comes so much from like your intuition. You know, it's like that divine
Mhm.
connection where it's just coming and flowing from places you don't even know, you know? And then I think
Definitely.
it's not so much an intellectual process. Oh, that's
I
so
really,
cool.
really do believe that. And it sounds a little precious to some, and I've become aware of that over the years. But, you know, there is something real about intuition and a feeling. And if you don't feel it while you're making something, assuming that someone else is going to feel something later, I think is just the wrong assumption to make. And you want to be able to help yourself feel it now because that is what other people are going to feel. And honestly, I mean, we've only put out 2 singles, but you know, the small amount of people that I have been lucky enough to be connected with over the years that have felt, you know, drawn to whatever it is that I'm doing, and you know, my fan base, which is very modest, but I'm so grateful to still be in touch with people that I've known for years that have cared. And the type of feedback that I've gotten from this record, even get feedback at all is such a gift. And to get the type of feedback that I've gotten has only truly reaffirmed what I felt like I already knew about this path. And I know that because I felt this so much more, that is being passed down to the listener, and that anyone who this will resonate with, it will resonate so much more because it was a very, very genuine creation rather than me trying to write the most successful pop song that I could, that I thought would be, you know, a radio hit, and then I recorded it with. I can't do things like that anymore because it just doesn't mean anything to me.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I definitely noticed like a difference too. I listened to the 2 new singles, which I love, by the way. Yeah, there is a more like it's just more intimate. Like you said,
Mhm.
could feel the connection to you and the like this feeling that was coming across. And then I revisited House of Souls. That's the last album,
Mhm.
right? House of Souls, which I still love
Yeah.
that album, but there are a lot more elements in there. And so this one seems like a lot more like stripped down. And sometimes I think when
Mhm.
you strip away all the fancy stuff, like you said, it's like that's where the soul is. Not that you can't add different elements, but there's something
Totally,
beautiful
totally,
about
totally.
that.
I don't think that the solution for every artist by any means is like having fewer elements, although I do think oftentimes that's a better way to go if you don't have a clear vision. It's always better to keep it fewer than just adding more stuff because you don't know what you want. But I don't think that everyone should make music with very few ingredients necessarily. But I do think, yeah, I think that whatever part of the process you connect with most, the simpler that you can make it, the better. And for me, it wasn't just recording in a simpler fashion. It was like once I got that road rolling, because I was recording 1 song per month. I don't know if everybody does this, but I often can almost imagine recording while I'm writing a song, or like kind of I have a feeling about something, whether it's I'm imagining how it's going to feel recording it, or I'm imagining what elements I might want to add. And once I boiled it back down to the simpler formula in the studio, it completely changed the way I was writing songs because I was writing breathable songs that had more space for an arrangement to exist in. Whereas a lot of the songs I wrote on House of Souls, it was difficult for people to write parts around them because I had so many changes and so many little parts that I added in. And there was nothing wrong with that. That's where I was at that point, and it's been part of my journey. But that's not what I really wanted to be doing, and I didn't know that at the time, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that you really have this talent for creating like a whole little world with your music. And a big
Thank
part of that is like the visuals. And so you recently released 2 music videos that were so amazing, shot on film.
you.
And it's cool to hear that you studied art history too. I'm kind of seeing like, and that you wanted to be a fashion designer. I'm kind of seeing like where these different elements come from because I've always really been like fascinated with your visual aspect. I remember years ago just like googling telenovela and looking at all the photo shoots you guys had done and like the creative, just such creative photo shoots and outfits, and like even your music, it sort of has this like ghostly kind of nostalgic vibe. Where do you think that comes from? And you're also into vintage clothes, this sort of like nostalgic, maybe longing for a different time. Is that something that you relate to?
Yeah, I mean, nostalgia is, I mean, nostalgia is certainly a part of it. You're 100% correct about that. But you know, it's so weird to even really know what that means because like anything that's not now is nostalgic. So to me, it's not so much like it's not wrong, definitely 100% true, but everything that's happened is such a vaster pool to choose from than what's happening right now, in my opinion, because it's just this long unfurling, you know, um, amount of material of, you know, whether it's visual or musical or looking in the past is so very satisfying because there is a great deal of material to take inspiration from. And it's not that I, I mean, we live in a pretty difficult time, and it's I don't consider the human-made contemporary world to be nearly as attractive as the human-made world in many times past. We're kind of making a lot of ugly practical buildings that are lacking in imagination, and sure, it's not particularly inspiring to me, but as far as the actual stories and material that I write about, I do actually consider myself a pretty contemporary artist because most of the crux of my inspiration is modern, but I do enjoy telling those stories, whether they're personal or fictitious, through the more imaginative lens of the past because I just think it is more aesthetically interesting, and I just find there to be a lot more um, ripe material to use as far as, you know, metaphors go, visuals, like you said. It's a lot to pull from, and so it is nostalgic, but it's also still us. I mean, humans haven't been around for very long, and we like to think of, you know, the 30s and 40s to have been a very long time ago, but it is to our little tiny brains, but it's all happening pretty fast, actually. And that still is very much a part of who we are. And I like to think of it that way. Um, but
I love
I don't know
that.
where I'm going with that.
No, I love that idea and the way that you put it, because I've always been, yeah, I'm also attracted to like vintage clothes and old
Hmm.
buildings and old architecture. There's just something like there's a little more soul in it. But I love what
Yeah.
you said about that still being a part of us, because that's true.
Hmm.
Like it wasn't that long ago. But there's something
Absolutely.
like,
Especially if it resonates with you. I mean, we don't have to resonate with things that are just made in our time. I mean, it's a long process becoming a human and becoming a species, and everything that came before is definitely a part of where we're going, you know.
yeah.
But
I wanted to ask you something else that you mentioned quickly because I feel like I can relate, but said that you don't consider yourself to be a prolific writer. What did you mean
mm-mm.
in that sense? What did you mean by that?
I guess it depends on who you compare yourself to, but I don't feel like I write as much material as a lot of fellow songwriters. I don't seem to be able to muster the energy that it takes to sort of create a body of material as frequently as I would like to. I'm trying to get a little bit better at that. I mean, a part of it really is work ethic. And I'm very aware of that. And, you know, if I was staying on top of the artist's way and doing my morning pages still, maybe that would be a different story. But kind of like you, I mean, I feel like I'm a multifaceted person. And when you're moving through the world and you find a lot of things interesting, you don't necessarily always want to just do the same thing. And sometimes your art making will benefit from stepping away. And I really, really enjoy doing a lot of different things. Yeah. And I like to leave room to have that other stuff be a part of my world. Yeah. And in order to do that, we can't be churning out, 2 or 3 records a year. That's just not a part of the game.
What are those other things for you? Other creative outlets?
I really love cooking. I really love gardening. When we get off the phone, I definitely have to go and water all the different garden sections that I have at my house that I've been working on, that I finally got going. There's my store, which I honestly really love the work. All that sort of tactile rote activity that's involved, cleaning and steaming and tagging. There's days where I'm not in the mood for it, but there's days where I need and enjoy having this task to do that my body knows how to move and do it without it requiring a lot of thought, because it's almost like going on a long walk where your mind can wander and think about things as you also have the satisfaction of accomplishing something,
Yeah.
That's important. Like getting shit done that lets your mind wander. Not enough people get to have that type of activity. I feel like it's a blessing.
It really is. It makes me think about a lot of the work I've been doing is so just like planning and scheduling and managing, and it's, online and all these different things, but it's hard to feel like there's nothing like physical work, like doing something and then seeing it done in front of you is so satisfying. Yeah. I love that. And I also love what you said back to the songwriting thing about like how much energy it takes to put into a song, like creative energy, like that is an energy. And so I definitely relate to like, I consider myself to be a little bit of a slower paced songwriter. But again, like you said, it's like what's the standard, Yeah. For me, it's like, I feel like I have to experience life for a year or two before I have a good set of emotions and experiences to write about. And then it kind of like, I can feel when it's ready to start flowing out. But I feel like I have to like experience life.
Aspect to acknowledge is huge. Yeah, you have to put something in the box before you can take something out of the box. Otherwise, there's nothing in the box and you have nothing to say, or you don't have that pool to draw from. So there's that too. That's astute. I know that this is supposed to be an interview on my end, but may I ask what you've been up? You said that you've been planning a lot of stuff, and I'm just curious what you've been planning, if I can ask that.
Yeah, totally. It's mostly for work. So I do a lot of different things. I, like I was telling you earlier, my parents own a clothing store. So I've been working for them behind the scenes, like sort of directing their social media team. And we started an online store this year because of COVID. So doing the online thing, directing and coordinating with their staff for their social media. And then I also do social media for a local restaurant in my neighborhood. So I take photos and like do all the planning for their social media. And then also like, planning my own stuff. I've been doing a lot of photography.
Oh my God, I wish you lived in.
Dude, oh my gosh, we have to do a shoot sometime. That would be amazing. Yeah. So photography stuff, and then this podcast, and then music stuff. So I'm like bouncing back and forth between a lot of different things. And it really does take a lot of like brain energy. So I've been trying to
Definitely.
be really careful about just finding balance. Cause I used to be very like, I'm definitely like a workaholic. I'm a
I
recovering
can tell.
workaholic. Yeah.
Well, I was excited when you invited me to do your podcast, and I actually wasn't familiar with it, so I'm excited to check out the other episodes. But you seem like a very relatable person to me, even though we haven't gotten to know each other very well. And I was excited to talk to you because um, it just seemed like it would be more of a natural conversation, because I see the videos that you make, and just when you book a tour, you just seem like somebody who's very detail oriented, who makes sure that things are done the way you think that they should be done. And I've been that person, and I've also been the person that got tired and tried to like fork everything over on other people, and then I was like super dissatisfied with what happened. So now I'm trying to find a balance, like it sounds like you also are doing, where you're sustaining yourself financially, you have a satisfying work life, you have a creative life, and you're trying to manage all the practical part of a creative world without getting burnout to where you hate it now because it's too
Yes.
much of the part that you don't like. Because I don't
Yes.
mind being practical and organizational stuff, but I definitely have a threshold, and I need to respect that threshold more. And because I know that I'm good at things like booking tours and stuff, sometimes I'll have these fantasies like, I should start a record label and do all of that for other artists. And then I have to tune in to reality and be like, Natalie, you are burning out just when you have to do all of that stuff yourself too much. So like, let's do this bite-sized here,
Oh my gosh, I
Be
relate to
real.
that so much. I've been realizing lately how like, yeah, I just like, I give out my creative energy so easily and so much because like you said, you have these skills and these talents. I'm like, oh, I want to share. I want to like share them with people and like help other people. But I've been realizing recently how much I like hold space for other people or for other projects or offer to hold space
Mm-hmm.
to the point where I'm just emptying myself out completely.
Yes,
And so I'm trying to be like more precious with that, realizing that it is like a precious resource and you have to like nourish that and you have to protect it, in order to
definitely.
keep it healthy.
Yeah, I know. I always want to be a part of what other people are making, and in the moment of volunteering it, which it's almost always me that volunteers for some reason, I am only remembering that satisfying, easy, fun part, and I'm not thinking about all of the other parts. And then, of course, that kicks in later after I've already signed myself up for this. But guarding that creative energy resource, I think, is a part of like, well, just maturing as any kind of creator, I guess. And also for me, it's been just the number one lesson of my 30s is like stepping into my own space and knowing my own limits and trying to get better at reserving what I need and only offering what's left over, which is not very much, to be honest, ever.
Hmm. Yeah, totally relate to
Unless you're
that.
getting paid for it, which is different. If you can make it your job, obviously I reserve creativity for Magic Mirror Vintage, but that's because that's sustaining me. So that's different. And it sounds like you've been able to find kind of really a similar sort of thing, through your parents' business, which is so awesome that that's what your family does. I'm sure that
Yeah.
it informed your style and your enthusiasm for vintage too, just growing up around that,
Oh
I would bet.
yeah, totally. I feel like that's why I've always like loved everything you do because it sort of reminds me of like my parents
Your
and
own
like my
world. That's
family. Yeah, it's totally like in sync with my world.
so
It's so
funny.
cool. So I have one final question I wanted to ask you. If you could give advice to your younger self, what would that
Mhm.
be?
Oh, so many things. If I could give advice, oh dang it, Chelsea. Um, I guess, oh man, I find that really challenging because I just have so much advice from my younger self that narrowing that down to like a little sound bite is really tricky. But
Mm-hmm.
um, I
I guess.
think, yes, you know what? I know what it would be if I had to pick one thing. And I feel like I've heard this a lot, and maybe it's a cliche, maybe not, but it's so true. I really, really wish that at a younger age, I had the confidence to trust my own vision more than I did. Because when I look back, the things that I made that still seem like they matter or resonate, whether it's to other people or whether it's to myself, were things that were created out of, honestly, the limitations that surrounded me. And I made it because I had no other option, whether it was a recording, whether it was a visual aspect to what we were doing or photography, you name it. Anything that I created with what I had that was from me, it still matters to me, and it still reflects the parts of my journey that I'm willing to show people and to share and to have be a part of my journey. Anytime I created something that I thought I was supposed to be doing, or there was such huge times of self-doubt where I took a different path because of my incredibly overwhelming insecurity or doubts that were planted into my head by people that I've dated or whatever the case may be, I would make things that no longer resonate with me at all because they probably never did. And trusting your own vision is such a scary thing because what if your making sucks, right? But if it does fucking resonate with you, and if you're making something out of nothing, that's cool. That's like your own little alchemical reaction. When you're making something that you think will help you be successful, God damn, I just so rarely see that work out. It's not that it never does, but also, is that really going to mean anything to you? You may think that you want that now, but that's actually not what you want. I can pretty much guarantee
Mm-hmm.
it. And
Wow.
that was many mistakes have been made because of lacking my own trust and my own creative vision, unfortunately. But now I'm in my
Yeah, that's such a good one. It actually makes me think too. It for me, it brought to mind the idea of femininity and
Mhm,
masculinity. I can't even say it.
mhm.
Femininity and masculinity. Both on like a conceptual level and like associating with the gender, because I
Mhm.
feel like as a woman in music, like we tend to doubt ourselves because there are so many more men. It's changing all the time, but I
Mhm.
think, we've both been in music for a long time. You have a lot of producers or collaborators or whatever, and people like sort of telling you what they think is best for you.
Yes,
And I think, and that's also the energy I've been learning about, like what that means spiritually, the masculine and feminine. We all have that inside of us. We all have both energies. It's not necessarily about gender, but like
definitely we do.
the
Yeah.
masculine's very like calculated. And like you said,
Mhm.
what do I think will bring me the most success? Whereas the feminine is more intuitive and just
Yes.
like in flow with like letting it come to you and not thinking about it so much.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of masculine energy in in the decision making sector of the music industry, on top of just it being, people really like to focus on when you're a female musician in a world where there's a lot of male musicians. But it's, to me, the bigger difference is kind of what you point out. It's like, it's the producers, it's the engineers, it's the sound people at the show. It's these people that we almost have to answer to that are supposed to be shaping, like, so sort of as a lens that our music passes through. And so it touches their energy as it comes out into the ears of the people who receive it.
Mhm.
And almost always they have something to say. And it's not that they don't necessarily have a right to have an opinion, but you don't have to listen to it. And it does
Yeah.
necessarily carry that much water compared to you listening to yourself. That is definitely the number one voice you need to hear.
Yes. And I think it's just easy. Like when I look back on my younger self in a band, I think
Mhm.
it's really easy to doubt that, to doubt your vision and think like, oh yeah, they know what's best,
Exactly.
I think
Oh my,
just as our society has taught us, we tend to listen to men a lot
mhm.
and let that drown out our own voices. And this is just now occurring to me, but I've always said that, like, especially in music and in a band, like there's nothing like a woman's touch. And maybe that sounds kind of old fashioned, but I truly believe that. And I'm just now like realizing that's what that touch is that
Yeah.
sort of like that intuition, that intuitive
Hmm.
letting it like flow and just not like overthinking it and being so
It's such an
practical and
important.
worrying about the equipment and all the fancy stuff. Like you said, it's just like, no, let's go back to the basics. Like what does my soul want for this song? What is channeling through me for this song?
Exactly. Feminine energy is such a key component of our humanity, and it's a sacred spiritual energy that is undervalued very, very often.
Yeah.
So
We're very out of balance right now in our society,
mhm.
in our worlds. We gotta
It's
bring it
the
back.
truth, sis.
Yeah, I mean, I think the more we learn to trust in ourselves, in our visions, the more we can bring that balance back. It is the patriarchy, but it's also like we have to trust in ourselves.
Yep. And that's the number one biggest step, honestly. It's kind of, the ball is sort of in our court in that way, because we
Yeah.
can make a choice to have that trust without anyone's permission. But it is hard to realize that, actually. I found that it was more difficult than one might think. And considering myself a strong person with a lot of masculine energy, I'm surprised it took me so long. But it's different for every person, I guess.
Yeah, I relate to that, the masculine energy and yeah, I think it's like you have to go through that journey,
Hmm.
in order to not necessarily arrive there. I don't think we ever arrive. I think it's a continual
That's
process and discovering, but
yeah.
yeah. Wow. Well, this was such an awesome conversation. It was so nice to catch up with you too. And I'm just so
You
glad to
too.
see, like,
I'm,
I'm so excited for your new album and I'm so glad to see that you're still doing it and you have your vintage store and I just love everything that you're doing. I find it really inspiring. Always have. So I hope that you just keep going, keep going. You're
Thank you,
inspiring
Chelsea.
people whether you know it or not.
I'm very truly tickled and humbled that you even wanted me to do this. So I thank you. It just says a lot that you invited me, and I appreciate it so much more than you realize.
Aw. And where can people find you and follow you online?
Um, well, there's the Instagram, which is Telenovella TX for Texas, which it's spelled weird. It's Telennovella. I wish I hadn't spelled it that way because I find myself having to explain that all the time. And then TX at the end. Um, and then what else should I say? Like, where should
Do you
we be?
have I mean, Instagram is good. You guys have a website or the
We don't.
album too? You have an album coming out. So
Oh yeah. Well, it's going to be on Spotify, and the album's called Merlin Bell, and it will be out February 5th. But there's a couple of singles. There'll be 4 singles coming out before the record comes out, which is kind of a lot.
yeah,
So
that's
it's
awesome. So
sampled.
find them on Spotify and check out the music videos. They're amazing. And definitely like pre-order the record and buy the record when that's all ready to go. I can't wait to hear it.
Yay! Thank you,
Yeah.
Chelsea.
Yeah, we'll keep in touch. Reach out
Absolutely.
anytime.
Oh my gosh, I hope that you come and stay with me again.
I would love
We have
that.
better accommodations for you now too. So
Yes. I know. I can't wait till we can like tour and play
I
shows
know.
and do all of
Oh
that
my God,
again.
I'm so antsy to
Ah,
travel again.
yeah,
Of
me
course.
too. Yeah. All right. Well, have a great rest of your day, Natalie. Thanks so
Thank
much.
you
Ah,
so much. Mwah.
take
Bye, lady.
care.